always stoking the fire. Adrenaline is overloading, hit the mat like a fighter. They never let up, never throwing, giving to their desires. No, they keep working on their focus.
Everyone, to the debut streaming telecast of Keep It in the Ring, where we focus on boxing, MMA, and combat sports each and every week here, live on the social media platforms, YouTube in particular. Keep It in the Ring. I'm Rich Mancuso, and I welcome in my co-host, Ernesto Diaz. And we welcome you, Ernesto, to the forum, to the program. Looking forward to this each and every week. And how you doing, Ernesto? You look like you're ready to put the gloves on.
I'm ready to rumble, man. I'm happy to be a part of the show. Keep It in the Ring. Something that we're looking forward to do every week for you guys. And just looking forward to chopping up the combat schedule with you.
Certainly there is always a lot going on in combat sports with boxing, with MMA. We're going to recap a big last few days in both sports and preview some things ahead and get into some topics. Of course, we want you all to contribute to the program each and every week. Leave your comments on social media. I'm at Ring786 at Twitter, at Facebook.com, Rich Mancuso, or right here on the program. There is a chat page, and we'll get back to you. And we'll also get your emails, too. And by the way, you can email me at ring786 at AOL. And Ernesto, where can they reach you?
You can reach me at Streampunk Entertainment on YouTube. We also have platforms on Instagram and Facebook as well. Streampunk Entertainment and Streampunk Combat.
An hour of Keep It in the Ring every week, and maybe more as we go along. It's up to you out there. If you want us, we're here. All right, Ernesto, let's get right to it. And everyone is still talking. Everyone is still buzzing about that terrific fight that Terence Crawford put on against Errol Spence Jr. this past Saturday in Las Vegas, Nevada at the T-Mobile Arena. It generated over $20 million in gate revenue, or maybe more. The preliminary pay-per-view numbers were pretty darn good. We're still waiting for that official figure. However, history was made. A fight, Ernesto, that was in the making for a few years and finally happened. And Terence Crawford continued his superiority and domination, and now at 147 has unified the titles, and the first fighter to be a unified champion in two weight classes in the four-belt era, that being at 140 and now 147. An effort from the second round on. It was all Terence Crawford. He showed what he can do, what he's been able to do. He was prevented to do, according to him, and now it looks more like that. Top Rank, his former promoter, kept him back, supposedly, from this fight with Errol Spence. What's great about it, Ernesto, is the two fighters who had respect for each other. We saw that before the fight and afterwards, how these two fighters, two of the best in the world, now Terence, of course, can say he's the greatest. He's the top pound for pound, without a doubt. Is how these two fighters put this fight together. We need more of that in boxing, and they did it. And the promotion was a success, and now we have a number one in Terence Bud Crawford. Your thoughts, Ernesto?
I thought that it was an incredible fight. It was very surprising because I believe that most pundits also went into the fight thinking that it was going to be a lot closer than it ended up being. I thought personally that it was probably going to go all the way to a decision, probably possibly a split decision, being that a lot of these big fights against guys who are so close in skill end up going that way. But Bud Crawford ended up proving to the world that there was a way bigger skill disparity than what we thought. He dominated from the second round on, as you said. He only really took the first round off to kind of feel him out. And from there, Spence had no other game plan to go to other than what he usually goes to. Crawford was able to stay patient and counterbox him and pretty much batter him with the jab and counter him to death while Errol kept on pressuring forward. And it resulted in the TKO in the 8th round.
How did you? It was the 9th round, actually. The 9th round. Let's clarify that. It could have ended earlier. I thought Spence took a tremendous amount of punishment. It showed at the end of the fight a lot of questions, and we'll get into this more deeply in a moment, Ernesto, about where does Errol Spence go from here, because he didn't look good, and it doesn't seem like he's the same Errol Spence Jr. that went on and copped all the titles, and of course Crawford was the WBO champ. Crawford got that WBA title to complete it with an effort a year ago against Ugas. Yep. The thing is that I thought going into this fight it was going to be an even fight based on what both have done in the past. Slight edge to Crawford because he's been in there more active than Spence has in the last year. However, when they got in that ring, I could sense a little bit of not butterflies, jitterbugs, or whatever, but from that first round, I could sense that this wasn't going to be a night for Errol Spence Jr.
No, not at all. I mean, honestly, they both came out confident, and I thought that it was going to be more even. But the thing that surprised me the most was the way that Errol wasn't able to adjust after the first knockdown. You know, the first knockdown came early in the second round, and after that, Errol kind of just went on autopilot, it looked like, and just continued to pressure forward without any other game plan, trying to set any punches up, trying to set up any counters against Bud Crawford. And it made it a lot easier for Bud to not only, you know, be defensive, but also counterbox him. And it's what caused him to get knocked down, you know, as well later on in the fight. The first 3 knockdowns of Errol Spence's career came in this fight. A guy who's known to be durable, a guy who took punishment against Sean Porter and against other fighters. Ugas, he took a little bit of punishment in that fight. And, you know, the way that Bud Crawford just ran through him is something that I think is still very shocking to a lot of people.
And also, he's a technical fighter. He jabs, and when he gets that jab going, as we see, and he knows how to counter, you're in trouble, basically. And I think Errol Spence, took the rat to that. Obviously, he did. And he saw that coming from that second round on. That first round was a little, well, you know, I'm here, you're here type of stuff. And then it was Terence Crawford dominating again. What amazes me about Terence Crawford is his durability. He doesn't lose his stamina. Usually he'll test his opponent for the first few rounds and then go on his counterattack, and all his skills come into play, like maybe 5th round, 6th round on, as he's done recently in his last few fights. But this one, I was amazed at how quick he adapted, and also Spence could not adapt to his southpaw stance. And, you know, and Crawford is a much better adapter. He can adapt and adjust, and he does that as a southpaw, going from the right to the left to the right. And I don't think Spence had any way to counterattack that, and that definitely showed. And then, yeah, those knockdowns were, you know, they weren't knockdowns that you could say ferocious knockdowns, but enough that Spence could not overcome him.
Right. He caught him on the button perfectly. They were perfect counters. And another thing that I don't think that Spence was prepared for was Bud being able to fight out of the out of the southpaw stance. He's known more for fighting orthodox. He can fight southpaw, but he just showed that a masterful execution of the southpaw stance. Another thing that was really impressive from Crawford was just his defensive capability in the fight. You know, Spence is known to be very durable. A lot of other fighters who have fought him said that, you know, he was the toughest guy that they've ever punched and felt in the ring. And Crawford just made it look easy. Crawford, he sort of used this sort of shell stance where he covered his body up as well as his chin. And I feel like that defensive stance allowed him to stay on balance more and be able to catch him with the counters that dropped him in those later rounds.
Yeah, that's analyzing it real well, Ernesto. It's obvious now, to follow up on all this, that Terence Crawford is the top pound-for-pound fighter in boxing. There's no debate. There's no argument about it. I mean, Spence dropped from maybe 1 or 2 to 10, or even down below the ladder after this. And there's no doubt that Terence Bud Crawford, at 36 years of age, who made boxing history, has more left in him. I mean, if he wanted to retire tomorrow, he could. Made a lot of money in this fight. Both fighters did. He's achieved so much in the sport now. I mean, what else he can do? So this comes into play as we move on a little bit, Ernesto. There was a rematch clause in the contract for Errol Spence. He lost the fight. He could get a rematch with Crawford, moving up in weight to 154. Both fighters have said they want to move up to 154. The question is, 154 doesn't thrill me if they do have a rematch. If they're going to rematch, I want to see them do it again at 147, which may not happen. The other thing here that comes into play is, will fans buy into a rematch after what we saw the first time?
I think that they will, but not an immediate rematch. And that's where the whole dilemma comes in with this, right? It was written into the contract, so we're most likely going to see this rematch immediately. But I feel like there will be more anticipation if Errol Spence maybe got a rebound fight where he was able to get a win in that fight. I don't think these guys are going to fight again at 147, being that they were both talking about how hard the weight cut was and that they want to do it again at 154. And I think we'll get a better fight at 154. You know, a lot of people came out of the fight with sort of viewing the cut to 147 as a detriment to Spence. They thought that he was drained and that could have played into a factor of why he performed so poorly and maybe why he, ended up getting TKO'd at the end of the day. But it's an interesting fight. I believe that it's better left with maybe Crawford and Spence going in other directions, and Spence, after getting another win after that, another rematch would be more enticing.
Well, I'll tell you, I prefer not to see a rematch at all. I'd like to see both of them move on. However, the way boxing is constructed today, with the streaming networks and the promoters, there will be a demand to do it again. But I don't know. I really don't know if Crawford wants to make that step so soon to 154. And if he does, he's looking to do it for another reason. Continue his legacy and try and and it can happen at 154 because that division is mediocre. It doesn't have the quality of the lightweights, the junior lightweights, or even at 140. So where you can see Terence Crawford easily becoming a 3-time unified champion in the 4-belt era, and that would be unbelievable. That's possible. Spence is talking even maybe if he continues going up to 160. He's even talked about Canelo Alvarez at 168, which I don't see. Ernesto, I just don't see. And I want your thoughts on this because you observe the sport as much as I do. I just don't see Errol Spence doing anything much left in this sport. He's made a lot of money, and I think he's damaged. Something's happened to this guy after 2 car accidents and a detached retina, and you were worried about his safety and concern during this fight.
For
because
sure.
he has a detached retina, and it didn't look good, and I was hoping that the corner would throw in the towel earlier. What do you think of that?
I agree with you on that front. I felt like the corner should have protected him a little more. It could have been stopped earlier. But at the end of the day, the only thing I don't agree with is the fact that he doesn't have anything left. I feel like he definitely does have a lot left to prove and to show in the sport. This is only his first loss, and it came against the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. So I think we need to put that into consideration. Let's just give him a bounce back. I feel like he needs a break after this fight. He definitely took a beating, a good prolonged break after this, and just another fighter who is in the elite level, but can, he'll be able to showcase his skills in there against.
Well, he's talking. Spence is talking about December, and we're in
way too soon. I feel
we're in August now, and I just don't see him
after the beating he took in this fight.
I can't see it. No, and he's only been fighting once a year, so there's a lot to consider here for Errol Spence Jr. right now. And leave it. I guess his trainer Derek James, who's a manager of champions right now, the trainer of champions. I guess he'll leave it up to him to determine. But as far as boxing itself, this was good.
It was
it was great. And you got people
after this as well, because
yeah.
the thing that I wanted to kind of piggyback on that you raised the point is at 154 there's already kind of like a built-in rivalry between Bud Crawford and the undisputed champion at that weight class, Jermell Charlo, which makes it easy for Terence to pursue that and possibly make even more history. And it's an exciting fight that I think a lot of people will want to watch, but it'll be dependent on how Charlo looks, I think, against Canelo, because that fight is still pending in the books. Happen in September. And I feel like if he puts up a good showing against Canelo and even wins, that will build the anticipation up for a Bud and Charlo match a million times over.
Yeah, that fight itself, Charlo and Canelo, that perplexed me. When they announced it, it perplexed me. But before we go to that, I insiders that know Terence better than I do have told me 154 is what he's looking at. Right now he's taking it easy in Nebraska at home with wife, family, kids, and enjoying the time off. He well deserves it. But that 154 is what he wants. See, 147 now leaves a void. If these two go, definitely 154. And the guy that I want to see get his time now is Jaron Boots Ennis from Philadelphia. To me, he's mandatory. And now Crawford has all the belts. So if Crawford goes to 154, obviously he's not defending those titles. They might be vacated. That gives Ennis more of an open door to get in there. I'd like to see Ennis get his due. It's his time. And his people down in Philadelphia are looking at that as well. If not, Ennis, there's talk about Ennis. And in that division now, it's Keith Thurman, who's just about done. Yeah. And really, you have Stenennis, who's in there. Virgil Ortiz Jr., his fights always get canceled, called off for some reason or another. You do still have some prominent welterweights at 147, but you don't have Errol Spence there now in the talk again, or Terence Bud Crawford, rather Crawford Spence. So the complexion of that division now has changed completely after this fight.
For sure, but I feel like it's in good hands with Boots Ennis. That's just another option for Crawford to explore. He has the world in the palm of his hands right now. He can kind of go any direction he wants, and any direction he goes to, we are sure to get a very entertaining fight against very highly skilled fighters. Because Boots Ennis, although he's fairly unknown to the general audience, he's a guy who, in a couple of years, I think has the potential to be a star.
Oh, he does. He's got tremendous power. And I saw his last fight at ringside down in Atlantic City a few weeks ago. Tremendous power. Had a little tougher fight than expected. And I forgot who he fought. The name will lose me right now. But I covered that fight. I should know. But, I'm an old man, Ernesto. Give me some breaks, But, yeah, he's been, for the last 2 years, really a big talk of the division. The thing is, when would Ennis get his opportunity? I think now is his opportunity after this fight. So we'll see where this goes. Isaac Cruz, yeah. Let's talk about the undercard. Let's talk about Pitbull Isaac Cruz, who I thought won the fight, and he did on the undercard. Guy that went against Gervonta Davis, who's in that top 10 talk of best pound per pound lightweight. And Pitbull deserves another shot. I don't know if he'll get Gervonta in a rematch, but somewhere down the line, he deserves another shot at the title. He looked good, went the decision route, but he looked good. Maybe not as good as he did against Davis. Surprised us all. But this guy, who's a veteran, came in, did what he had to do.
For sure. I was impressed with his performance. I feel like, my biggest takeaway after this was what was coming next for him. I know that he had the fight with Gervonta already, and I feel like Gervonta is going some other directions. I know he's looking to either move up or face a guy like Shakur Stevenson or one of the other big names at, 135. A big guy who emerged out of the contender queue is Ryan Garcia. He called him out after the fight and said that
I'm not high on Ryan right now. I don't know where that kid is going. He changed trainers again. Which goes to show maybe his mentality in this sport. He this third trainer in the last 2 years. and him and Oscar De La Hoya parted ways. So I don't know. I don't know where he's going. I don't know where Ryan Garcia is headed. I think he took the Gervonta Davis fight much too soon in his career, and he was outmatched. We all know what happened there. So, but yeah, I mean, Ryan Garcia is still in the mix there, lightweight, or maybe he's talked 140 as well.
Yeah, I think 135 is still the weight for him. I think he should still pursue opportunities there. You know, Isaac Cruz and Garcia having a mutual opponent in Gervonta Davis makes it a more interesting fight. Kind of want to see who out of them two would emerge as the better fighter and see if they can work their way back to a rematch against Tank or to another title opportunity, you know, somewhere else if he happens to move up.
Or Gervonta Davis, Shakur Stevenson is a very, very interesting matchup. Boxing fans have been buzzing. They want to see a fight like that. Here's the issue. It goes as so often is the case in boxing. Gervonta is with the PBC and Shakur with Top Rank.
Right.
PBC and Al Heyman, Top Rank and Bob Arum, they've done it before, but they're having more differences as it is. So we may never get to see a fight like that. And that's the problem with the sport. You have too much of this division with streaming networks. I write about this all the time on boxing, New York Sports Day, Latino Sports, among the sites I write for. And you know that, Ernesto. Too many promoters in the mix, too many of the streaming networks in the mix, and now you have this mass confusion. You know, that's why Crawford and Spence did this, why they ought to be commended, because they did it themselves. They bypassed all the politics of boxing and put this fight together because they know this was a fight for boxing, a fight the fans wanted, and they finally got it. If they didn't put their two heads together, we would have never saw it. Stevenson and Gervonta, I don't think that'll happen. It has to be the two promoters. A totally different story there. The 1980s, way before you were born, I covered those fights. In that generation, this was a generational fight, by the way, for a guy like you. 1980s, Hagler, Hearns, Duran, and Leonard. Yes. Welterweights up to the middleweight, and you had no problem putting those four in the ring, battling each other for supremacy. Even Macho Camacho in another division, all those guys from Puerto Rico, all those great champions. Why? Because we didn't have all this. You had HBO. That's all you had.
Right.
You didn't have all this other stuff.
You also didn't have as many sanctioning bodies, trying.
No, alphabet soup. That's exactly what I call it. Alphabet soup, which is another story. And also, I want to bring up a topic. We're gonna focus on this in the weeks to come on Keep It in the Ring, judging in boxing. And my intent is to get a real fight judge on this program. Question them what goes into making a decision after watching two fighters go 10 or 12 rounds of championship fights, where so many fans are disgusted with seeing all this. So many fans are tired of seeing decisions go the wrong way, because I call them three blind mice at ringside, and I want to get a real judge here on the program, and I want to know what goes into your decision-making when it comes to the scorecards. We're glad that this fight didn't get that way, that it went through the knockout route and not the decision, because as much as Crawford dominated, you wonder, don't you?
I mean, a fight that one-sided, it would have been very hard for a judge to try to sneakily give it to Errol Spence, because, again, all the judges had it completely for Crawford in that fight. So that fight's a little bit more of an anomaly, but I agree with you, though. There's way too many funny decisions. Even a fight going to decision shouldn't mean that there should be so much controversy when it comes to judging, you know? There's clear criteria in the books that I feel isn't really clarified as much to the audience, which is why you have each division. And getting a judge on the show would help kind of clarify that, not only for us, but for the audience as well.
I have feelings about replay and also about open scoring after every 4 rounds or 4 rounds, which I don't know if I'd like that idea, but something has to be done. The solution, which will never happen, I've been writing about this for the last 20 years or so, National Boxing Commission. And you have one commissioner that could supervise all this. And another topic we're going to touch on. Gambling and online betting, that's predominant today. Does it have a bearing on these judges, on the referee? Even some of the referees are in this mix too, stopping a fight much too early, looking at precautionary measures for safety, of course. But is online gambling, and too much of it now, almost in every state in this country, having a bearing on these fights? It's something we got to look into, Ernesto. Some we're going to examine on this program. We call it Keep It in the Ring every week here on your social media platforms and YouTube. I'm Rich Mancuso. This is Ernesto Diaz. Welcome in, everyone, and we want your comments as well. So let's move on. Let's talk about another fight and another fighter from Japan who's sparking a lot of interest and is in that pound-for-pound best mixed.
Yes. Naoya Inoue defeated Stephen Fulton. It happened in the middle of the week. It happened before Saturday's Bud Crawford fight, and he had everybody thinking that maybe he was the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world after he dispatched of Fulton in the way that he did. Fulton was undefeated going into the fight, as well as Inoue, and I believe that this was another fight that I think a lot of people thought would go to the judges. A lot of people thought that Fulton would give more resistance than he did to Inoue, and Inoue just ended up making it look easy. Tell us about it, Rich. What did you see in that fight?
Well, what I saw is tremendous punching ability from Inoue. I see a fighter here that has to take his skills to the United States. He's got to show his skills to the United States, and it can't be a fight that's got to be televised at 4 a.m. live.
For sure.
We need to see this in prime time on ESPN, top-ranked platform, which he's a part of. That would make him more accessible to the public. Can give him more the exposure that this man deserves. Because right now, he's not being talked about as the best pound for pound, and he could very well be, Ernesto.
For sure. And I think that that'll come with time. He's still very young. Most of his fights have taken place in Japan, which is why he's not as well known to the wider audience. But after defeating Stephen Fulton, who's known a little bit here in America as well, I believe that he has big fights lined up for him, and they will take place in America where more audiences will be able to watch him. A lot of people are looking forward to his future and seeing if he would want to maybe move up to fight some of the guys up at lightweight, even though that I'm still kind of, skeptical on, only because I think that those guys are a lot bigger than him still, and it would be a big adjustment for him to take on a guy like Tank Davis.
Another great fighter from Philadelphia was Fulton, but he felt the power, that's for sure.
Yep.
In Japan, and they're looking. I heard about a rematch too. Fulton would like one, but not in Japan. Not like Ambosis took his title defenses against Devin Haney in Australia, where he lost twice.
Right.
Fulton wants to do it here in the States, and Top Rank might be able to do that. My people at Top Rank told me there's talks about it, so we'll see where that goes. We're gonna talk a couple of more fighters on the agenda here, but Ernesto, I've got to talk about Regis Progress and Devin Haney, because Devin Haney is in that pound-for-pound discussion, top 10, maybe 5 in my book. And him and Progress in October will fight for the WBA 140 title that Progress recently won. That, to me, threw me off a little bit. I didn't think Progress and Haney would get it going that quick, but there was a demand for that fight also, and they're going to do it.
Yeah, I think, it falls more on Haney wanting to move up. I know he had other options at his weight class that he's the champion in, but he wants to challenge himself. He wants to move up. I think that it would be a great fight. Prograis is a bigger guy. A lot of guys are questioning whether Devin Haney has enough power to kind of bother Prograis. It's going to be exciting. I can't wait to watch that one.
Yeah, and Devin Haney going from 135 to 140, and you go to one, and there's a situation too. Then you have to vacate the titles, and you see that's why boxing is so crazy. As much as I love it, it. Everyone knows.
He won't be vacating these titles, though. I think the boxing commission gave him.
They'll let it go.
Yeah, they're gonna let it go.
And bypass the mandatories in the lightweight division with others that want a shot at his titles, which I don't think is fair. But they do it. They do it for one reason: money. They do it for one reason: the streaming networks and the promoters. That's why they'll do it. Devin Haney wants that fight. The two of them clashed about it a month ago, and now it's made. But I like that fight. I like it very much. Haney, to me, in his last fight against Lomachenko, he might have lost it.
Yeah, I thought he lost it. It was a very close fight, but again, it's one of those fights that could have gone either way, and it's a result that I'm not too mad at. I think that it'll still be a great fight. Haney, what I'm more curious of is, let's say he were to beat Prograis and be the champion at that weight class. Would he go back down to defend those titles, or would he vacate them? Would he stay up at the higher weight class?
That's the question. That's it.
A lot of big-time fighters, big fights to be made at the lower weight class that I feel like a lot of people would want to see those fights more than the fights at the higher weight class.
Yeah, but you know what? When you go 135 and below, that's where you see a lot of action. I love those bantamweights. We're going to talk about a big fight coming up in the featherweight division. It's coming up next weekend. Top Rank, ESPN, Navarrete and Valdez. That, Ernesto, is going to be a battle. I'm going to call it a war. I don't like using that word. But that's going to be a battle. You're going to see 12 rounds. I know this fight's going the distance, and you're going to see 12 rounds with two of the best in that division going at it, pound for pound. You're going to see jab for jab, punch for punch. They're going to be like in a telephone booth. You know, they call it that telephone booth fight, a fight you want to see. And those are the divisions, 135 and below, where you get fights like that. I'm looking forward to that. I might be there at ringside. I don't know yet. I got to make up my mind next few days. But you know what? I don't have a pick in that fight. I couldn't tell you, but I love Navarrete. I always watch a Navarrete fight. He is so exciting. He's like Manny Pacquiao was at that weight class years ago.
And if he's anything like Manny, then that's a fight that I'll want to watch as well. Those are two guys that I'm not as familiar with, so it's something that I'm going to need to keep an eye on just so that I can, analyze it for the future. But you've got me excited for that one, and I hope that you're excited for that as I'm excited for another fight that is coming up, Amanda Serrano, who's going up against Heather Hardy.
Yeah. Now, did you see the news that came out today about her?
I didn't.
Well, she's going to the PFL, the Professional Fight League. She's going to work. She's going to do MMA now too. She's already had 2 fights as an MMA fighter, and she's signed a contract with along with Jake Paul, to go to the PFL as well. Interesting.
We're talking Serrano or Hardy?
Amanda Serrano.
Okay, Serrano. I didn't know about Serrano's MMA background.
Yeah, that came out late this afternoon.
That's really good for her. You know, I know
Ernesto, why they call me Keep It in the Ring is I get all this info.
Her and Jake Paul have been under the same promoter's house for the last couple of fights, so I'm not surprised that she signed with PFL as well. PFL is looking to take on more talents for their shows, and I feel like it'll bring a lot of eyeballs. Amanda Serrano is a very talented fighter, and she's going to be going up against Heather Hardy, who just is coming off of a win against Katie Taylor. That's a fight that should have happened as well. Katie Taylor, when she fought Heather Hardy, actually fought on short notice. It was supposed to go against Amanda Serrano. Serrano ended up getting injured, where Heather Hardy came and took advantage of the opportunity and ended up beating Katie Taylor for all of her belts. And now we're going to see Amanda Serrano go in and try to avenge herself. And we're going to see what kind of showing she could put on. I think that...
Well, yeah. I mean, you know what Serrano's done for female boxing. Clarissa Shields as well, but more Amanda Serrano unifying titles and that capacity crowd and historic fight in the Madison Square Garden like a year ago. So it is now with natural.
I really thought that Serrano won, by the way. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I thought she won. Yeah, but female boxing, the women's division is getting more acclaim, more notoriety because of Amanda Serrano. In fact, she jumped me on the bandwagon with the female division women's boxing. I've never been a fan of it, and she made me a fan of it. Now, she did that to a lot of boxing people. So good for her. Ernesto, we keep it in the ring here. I'm Rich Mancuso. That's Ernesto Diaz. We're here. Keep it in the ring every week. And we're going to talk now. Let's before we go to the UFC, and there's a lot going on there, where you're more of an expert on that than I am. Well, the heavyweight division's still perplexing. I mean, Tyson Fury can pick and choose who he wants with Top Rank. And you have Anthony Joshua coming up with a fight. And, nobody knows who the heavyweight champion is since the Klitschko's left. And even when they were the champions, they dominated the division, pick and choose who they wanted to hold those titles forever, for the longest. It's not like the days when I covered the heavyweight championship with Muhammad Ali and even close to Mike Tyson era. We knew who the champion was. We don't know who the heavyweight champion is. Your take on the heavyweight division right now, is it legitimate?
I think it's legitimate. I mean, we got a little bit of a gimmick going on now with Fury taking the route of wanting to fight Francis Ngannou and kind of like a super fight between styles, MMA and boxing. But, I feel like before this happened and before Usyk ended up getting all his titles, we kind of did see Tyson Fury distinguish himself as the heavyweight fighter of the era over guys like Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, who he beat in 2 out of their 3 fights. That trilogy, I feel like, really cemented who the real heavyweight champion was of this era. Tyson Fury ended up getting out on top of that. It could have happened for Joshua, but he kind of had a roadblock with the Ruiz loss, and then after that, he kind of recovered in not so spectacular fashion, and then ended up with Usyk, who kind of put the brakes on Anthony Joshua being the guy of this era.
Everything went here and there, and everyone thought that Anthony Joshua was the next big real thing, and then Andy Ruiz spoiled that party at Madison Square Garden a few years back. That I covered that as well. We're still shocked about that outcome. Of course, Joshua then would revenge and beat him. Next week, Ernesto, we're going to shift to UFC in a moment. Next week, you and I will put our top 10 pound for pound, because everyone wants to debate that. But I think it's clearer now as we started this program off, our initial program this week. It's much clearer now and a definite. We've established Terence Bud Crawford is the top pound for pound fighter in boxing right now. Canelo Alvarez no longer has that throne. Oh, by the way, we'll be fighting Charlo in September. And that's going to be on Showtime pay-per-view, by the way. He's a free agent. Still the biggest free agent in boxing. He could do what he wants, go where he goes, and he can retire if he wants with all that money. What are we kidding, right? So we'll do that next week. So, Ernesto, the UFC continues to rival boxing. And this past Saturday, of course, with the Crawford-Spence fight, the UFC put on a spectacular show. In fact, I went to a local place, and they had both fights going on at the same time, both telecasts. You had the ESPN pay-per-view, UFC. You had Showtime pay-per-view, Crawford-Spence. Give us a recap what happened over the weekend, UFC, because that was a rematch that was well done.
Yes, UFC 291. We ended up getting a big rematch between Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier, a rematch of their fight a few years ago, which was a fight night main event. This time it was a little bit more stakes at hand for the BMF title, and we had a crazy result. We saw Justin Gaethje knock out Dustin Poirier in the second round via head kick, and it was one of those knockouts that was so shocking because it's been such a long time since we've seen Dustin Poirier take a loss like that. He hasn't been knocked out since back in 2016. We knew that Justin Gaethje had the ability to, knock him out. But because the first fight went how it went, we saw a battle of attrition for 5 rounds before Gaethje finally got knocked out. Nobody expected it to end as early as it did. And it ended up being a great fight. The first round was pretty even. A lot of people thought that Justin Gaethje ended up winning that round. The judges had it for Justin Gaethje. I personally had it for Justin Gaethje as well. And in the second round, Dustin wasn't able to make adjustments, and Gaethje ended up hitting him with a beautiful combination where he feinted a right straight and threw the high kick over the guard of Justin Gaethje, which landed right at the back of the head because he turned his head a little bit and ended up dropping and knocking him out.
Yeah, I saw that, and that was a spectacular kick to the head.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
and it's what I love about UFC fighters. I'm getting more into the UFC. I have to. I have no choice. I'm going to be broadcasting some UFC, and there it is. Vanessa, are these the two premier fighters in UFC?
Yeah, they're two of the top contenders of the 155 division. That's the lightweight division in the UFC. This was sort of a de facto number one contenders fight because we have the champion of the division, Islam Makhachev, already scheduled to fight Charles Oliveira in a rematch of their fight that took place last year.
And so where do we go from here? What happens next?
So from here, we'll see potentially Justin Gaethje take on the winner of that fight that's going to happen in September between Oliveira and Makhachev. Gaethje has already fought Oliveira before for the title, and he has already lost to him. So we'll see if he can maybe avenge that loss and, kind of put the bow on his career that he wants to of getting a UFC belt finally. And if it doesn't end up being Oliveira, we'll get a fresh matchup between him and the champion Makhachev. Makhachev used to train with Khabib Nurmagomedov, who used to be the champion of the division before Makhachev won the title. And Nurmagomedov's last fight in the UFC was against Justin Gaethje. It was a title fight that he beat him in, and they have similar styles, which is what's intriguing about a fight between Gaethje and Makhachev. So it's going to be something interesting to see. As far as Dustin Poirier, though, I feel like it's tough to tell what's next for him, being that he is getting up there in his age. He's getting a little older. He has taken a lot of damage in his career, and he has already come out and said that he doesn't really want to fight young up-and-coming fighters and who are coming up the rankings. He kind of just wants to take big fights against big names. So we'll just need to see who's the next biggest fight available. It could potentially be Conor McGregor, a rematch with Michael Chandler, who's another very exciting fighter in the division, or another big name like possibly Tony Ferguson, who also fought on the card, but probably isn't as intriguing because he's on a big losing streak of his own.
A question. I'm going to throw some UFC names out to you.
Yeah.
Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor. Are they done with this sport? Do they have anything planned?
So Nate Diaz has an upcoming fight against Jake Paul. That fight is coming up in a couple of weeks. I don't think he's completely done with MMA. His contract with UFC expired last year, and he did say that was going to be the last fight of his contract and that he was going to take a break from MMA because he wanted to pursue some of these boxing opportunities. And so he's taking this opportunity against Jake Paul, which I'm sure he's going to make a lot of money for. If he ends up defeating Jake Paul, I feel like we may see him in the boxing arena for a few more fights after that, which could delay a UFC return. But as far as Conor McGregor, he's definitely not done with the sport. He's a guy who, after every event, is live tweeting, wanting to challenge whoever it was that won their fight in the main event. He's a guy who has sort of a fight scheduled with Michael Chandler. They're going through their season of The Ultimate Fighter right now on TV, and normally the two coaches of The Ultimate Fighter end up fighting each other on a pay-per-view sometime later in the year, but that hasn't been officially made because Conor McGregor still has not entered into the USADA drug testing pool. And until he does, he won't be able to fight.
I'm getting involved with the MMA. We here on the network, we're broadcasting a MMA event in mid-September in upstate New York, up in the Beacon County area. And when I talk to some of the MMA fighters, I pose the question Conor McGregor to them, and they don't give you very, very good positive vibes, not based on his ability or what he does in the cage, but his actions outside the cage and his reputation. And I cannot get into Conor McGregor because of that. I'm hearing he may have something going too with WWE. They're still interested in him. They got Logan Paul in there as well. One guy that I profiled on NewYorkSportsDay.com last week, the other grandson of the great Muhammad Ali, Biagio Ali. He's an MMA fighter. He's one of the top prospects in the Pro Fighters League, not the Pro Fighters League. There's a series on ESPN, the championship playoffs in MMA, and you know about that, right?
Yeah, that's the PFL.
And he's fighting in the Garden. Perhaps you'll go there with me. By the way, Ernesto, I got to tell you one thing. what I'm really impressed with, but you're going to do this every week better than me. You're very good at pronouncing these guys' names. I'm not. I'm horrible with that. You're really good at it. Good job, my friend. But Biagio Ali is fighting at lightweight and looking to take that championship in Madison Square Garden in 3 weeks. It is a semifinal and final event, 2 separate nights at the Garden. We'll get those dates to you next week. I'm going to be there. Maybe you'll join us as well. I learned a lot just watching Biagio train, and also learned a lot more about him and his brother. Catch that article I wrote. I don't know if you read it on NewYorkSportsDay.com about his the Muhammad Ali legacy and what he's trying to do now as an MMA fighter and continue the Ali name and legacy, because his other brother is Nico Ali Walsh, who's the undefeated fighter, also on ESPN. But UE talk continues at Keep in the Ring tonight with me and Ernesto Diaz. Welcome in, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll be here each and every week on different social media platforms, including YouTube. So log in and give us a comment, and we'll be ready to get back to you. A lot going to happen here on this program each and every week, and we hope you join the bandwagon of Keep It in the Ring. Yes, let's go to UFC 291. That's the thing that, Ernesto, the thing about UFC and MMA, that the way they call their divisions, like a lightweight is not in UFC. Biagio Ali fighting as a lightweight, right? But he's not at 150, not at 130 that a lightweight would be in boxing, which is another good topic to discuss. He's fighting a lightweight in UFC there. He's 155.
Yeah, that
not
would be
130. So now, what do you mean by UFC 291? For those who know already, educate me a little more. I know, but I want you to tell me more.
There were other fights on the docket as well that night. The co-main event saw Alex Pereira go face-to-face with Jan Blachowicz, who was the former UFC light heavyweight champion. Alex Pereira ended up defeating him by decision after 3 rounds, and I feel like that was not really an entertaining fight. It was a fight that was affected by the altitude that they fought at. A lot of grappling done by Jan, who was trying to exploit that weakness in Pereira's game plan. He's known mainly as a kickboxer. But Pereira showed great takedown defense and showed that he's more than just that one dimension, which gives you hope that he will put up a great fight against whoever he may be facing for the light heavyweight championship next. We know that division has a vacated championship. That division's been cursed for a long time, and we're hoping that, whoever he fights, whether it's Jiri Prochazka or Jamal Hill, whenever they return from their injuries, will bring some stability to that division fight.
So, in your opinion, and I want an honest opinion, Ernesto Diaz, you're a UFC guy. I'm a boxing guy. Well, you're also a boxing guy as well, but I focus more on boxing than UFC, obviously. Combat sports, it's all in the same area. Demographically, UFC caters to a younger audience. We know that. Boxing gets a little of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But in your opinion, honest opinion, right now, who stands first, UFC, MMA, or pro boxing in general, as more popular among fans?
I feel like that I'm going to lean towards MMA on that. Not because I have an inherent bias.
All right, we're going to have our first debate of the program. Go ahead. Why?
But mainly because of how much more frequently they're on. They have a deal with ESPN where the UFC is basically putting on events on a weekly basis.
No, boxing has an event, has a deal with ESPN, and they put on event, if not every week, every other week, and they have some top fighters on ESPN. That's one.
Right, but the viewers.
Where else do you find UFC fights besides ESPN?
It's mainly on ESPN. It's exclusively ESPN.
All right. Okay, so with boxing, you have The Zone, which also does MMA as well, and you have Showtime, so among others, and then you have some other networks as well. So you're telling me that UFC has more popularity, MMA?
Yes, just based on the demographics being trending towards younger. Also, UFC has a stronghold on the whole MMA community as a whole. They're the main organization that gets presented, which is why you don't see MMA on many other channels. When you do see them on Showtime, it's other promotions like Bellator.
Have you seen the ratings lately?
I haven't had an eye on the ratings, no, but the UFC always comes out with big numbers that show that.
Well, ESPN Boxing is getting substantially better numbers than MMA, UFC MMA on ESPN. Substantially better.
That's something that I'm going to be interested in talking with you about in the next coming weeks. That's another topic for
And if we don't come to an agreement, Scott Churston, our great producer in the background, I want to hear a bell. I want to hear it because we're going to go round for round. Me, Rich Mancuso against Ernesto Diaz. What sport is doing better and why? Is it UFC or is it boxing? And you got a UFC guy there and a boxing guy in me, the purist, who will tell you that it's boxing still reigns. Demographically, you got to look demographics as well. And I think, like, then we go back to Crawford, Spencer, Nestor. I think everyone was into that fight. Even the novice boxing fan tuned in, but they won't watch another fight, though. That's the issue. They only gear towards a big fight because everyone's talking about it.
Exactly. Whereas, with UFC, they're kind of dominating the combat sports conversation week to week because even when they don't have their particularly huge fights going on, they have other events and other fighters that are highly ranked still fighting each other on a week-to-week basis, which has the general audience kind of talking about them more, just has them more in the public consciousness that way.
Okay, again, as we get to wrap up this program, our initial first program of Keep It in the Ring, it's flown by for almost the hour is almost up. We started with Crawford Spence, and we talked about all the implications of that fight, and we talked about who the top fighter is in boxing right now, pound for pound. We all both agreed it was Terence Bud Crawford. I think a majority of the boxing world will have no argument with that. And as far as an MMA fighter, who do you right now reigns in superiority and popularity?
In terms of popularity, it's still hard to beat Conor McGregor. He's the guy who has, all these endeavors outside of the ring. He fought Floyd Mayweather. He's still the dominating name. But if you were to, take him out of the equation and say who's the next most popular fighter, I'll go ahead with John Jones. He's a guy who's been in the game for a long time now. He became the heavyweight champion just a few months back, second title in a second weight division. And he's known universally now, basically, as the greatest MMA fighter of all time. Still technically undefeated. And he has another big fight coming up as well in November. A lot of people are going to be tuned into that. It's going to be happening at Madison Square Garden. And a lot of people have been talking about him over the last couple of years. And, I'd say he's the next best popular fighter in the UFC.
And the UFC's in MMA and UFC is going to get another big boost soon. Because after SummerSlam, Ronda Rousey, WWE, going back to UFC. And I think she's going back to Dana White, from what I heard. But they'll get a big boost in the female division. Did you hear that she's going to go back with Dana White?
I've heard rumors about it, but that hasn't been made official.
But she is going back to the MMA. She's doing MMA again.
That hasn't been made official yet.
My wrestling sources tell me that that's just about done. But you got sources. I have sources. That's a big part of it. You have one opinion. I have an opinion. That's a part of it. That's what we do here every week on the program. Keep It in the Ring. Ernesto, our first show, we went around the horn with boxing, UFC. We'll have much more next week. And in the weeks to come, we're going to line up some interesting guests here. Some stars of the past and some of these boxing and UFC stars of the future that are out there right now for you, the audience, on Keep It in the Ring. And remember, folks, I could be reached on social media at Twitter at Ring786, Facebook.com, Rich Mancuso, and read my content on NewYorkSportsDay.com, LatinoSports.com, and Worldwide Boxing. Ernesto Diaz, where do they reach you, my friend?
Streampunk Entertainment, Streampunk Sports, and Streampunk Combat, on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Find us all over.
And I'll tell you, this was a great program. Went by fast for the first hour of our venture here. And thanks, Scott Churston, behind the scenes. And any final thoughts?
no final thoughts. I'm just happy to be a part of the show, and also happy that we had such a great weekend of fights. You know, it was
Yeah,
better weekends in a long time. It's rare that you get two huge, not only boxing
exactly.
fights
Right.
as well concurrently, and that always makes the weekend even more special.
Well, let's do it again this weekend, but it's not happening. The weekend after, though, Navarrete and Valdez, ESPN top rank from Chandler, Glendale, Arizona. I hope to be there. That's going to be a dandy. All right, Ernesto, we'll talk next week, my friend. And here's what we got to tell everyone to do. Comment, like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. That's where you're seeing us. And also, when we close off every week, just like we begin every week, we say this together. What are we going to say?
Keep it in the ring.
Keep it in the ring, everyone. Thank you for watching. Take care. Be safe. And, of course, always take care of each other. God bless. Till next week. I'm Rich Mancuso. That's Diaz. Keep in the ring.